our legal system, and especially in family courts, when we hire an attorney, we should expect error-free service in order to see justice. We should expect the same from our plumber, right? What we get instead is bombastic purveyors of superior ability and accuracy. Our guest today has seen this firsthand, and in his story, we will see the failure of our judiciary and family courts, where families get swallowed in their hallowed halls, and where litigants are overwhelmed by a brain salad. Our guest today is Anthony Pappas, who has been involved in the family law system, the family court system in Nassau County for several years now. My name is Gary Jacobs, and I'm guest hosting today for Chris DiMaggio, who will also be on the show today as well as a co-host. Anthony, first, I read your story, and it's really overwhelming, and there's a lot to digest in a half-hour period. Let's start at the beginning. Tell us about your marriage, when you were married, what your marriage was like before your wife filed for divorce.
We got married in 1982, and we had 3 children. So after 22 years of marriage in 2004, my wife, now my ex-wife, filed for divorce. Fortunately, given the age of the children, there were no issues involving custody and visitation since they were all about over the age of 18, or as the divorce continued, they became older than 18. So basically, it was an issue of divorce and division of the assets, although peripherally, or should maybe say directly, the assets of the children became an issue as well, because my ex-wife brought them up in order to, recover in order to increase the amount of money she would make out of the divorce filing.
Right. You seem to be an intelligent guy. What is it that you do, if I can ask? What do you do for a living?
I've been a professor of economics at St. John's University in Jamaica, Queens for about 38 years.
Okay. I'm reading your case, and it just really looks like your case took a turn for the worse or for the horrible. What is it that you feel made your case just go so far downhill? Because it seems pretty simple to me reading it. As you said, the children were older, it should be black and white. You had a long-term marriage, you're a W-2 employee, you split the assets, and you go your separate ways. What happened here that made your case take such a horrible turn for the worse?
Basically, in terms of like splitting the assets, the issue became what constituted the marital assets that deserved to be split. Now, under the law, if you have assets from before the marriage, or you inherit assets from your parents or your relatives, those are deemed to be a separate property, right, and they are not subject to equitable distribution, or generally right, they wouldn't be subject to equitable distribution. So the divorce became entangled in defining what were the marital assets, and the other issue was the assets that were set aside for the children. Did they belong to the children, or did they somehow become marital assets subject to division as well?
In reading your papers, a lot of the papers looks like you were the author of them, and obviously, based on what you do for a living, you're an educated man. Did you represent yourself from day one, or did you hire an attorney going into this?
No, I hired attorneys, and over the course of the approximately 10 years that the case has lasted, I've had several attorneys. And again, with the passage of time, nothing can remain frozen or in the status quo. One of my attorneys had like a stroke, and due to age and so forth, he was a former judge, Judge Cohn, and I felt he was going to guide me well, but unfortunately he had a stroke, so I had to replace him. So again, nothing remains frozen in the course of 9-10 years of litigation. So
Anthony, as he was saying, the 10 years, the distributive aspect couldn't have been settled in 10 years. That was the primary issue you were litigating, right?
Well, it should have been settled, but when you have the judges deliberately siding with your ex-wife and defying the facts and logic and making up their own facts and logic and law to help her out, then you're not going to settle anything. So there's
because you're going to fight for what you believe is fair.
Right. You fight for what you feel is fair. Gradually, with the expenditure of funds and effort, the pie that's available to be shared shrinks even further and makes a settlement
you're not
even
alone,
harder.
because a lot of people have gone through that kind of thing and sustained tremendous losses just simply because if there's an unfair element which can't be decided by one side, because the unfair element has to be protected by the litigant being purposefully hit by it.
That's correct. So I would say really the judges behaved like bullies. One could even refer to them as psychopaths. They're just trying to wear somebody down until he surrenders or caves in, and they are just bullies, and they can do whatever they want.
They made themselves part of your distribution, didn't they?
I'm not sure.
The system has decided to extrapolate the amount of money that was available to pay for the legal fees to get you to the point where they wouldn't settle. I mean, it's going to continue on. They draft money from you to pay to keep yourself in the fight.
Yes, right. They are exhausting your assets.
Co-conspirators.
I've had to, devote my earnings basically over 10 years to the effort and go substantially beyond that, utilize funds that I had inherited or, that existed at the commencement of the divorce 10 years ago to continue this struggle for justice.
So now you're representing yourself pro se, or do you still have an attorney representing you?
I have an attorney representing me in the state court action, which is the divorce proceeding. I commenced an action in the United States District Court citing violations of civil rights and other constitutional privileges. And in the federal court case, I am pro se representing myself.
I read in one of your court documents where one of the judges in Nassau County issued a restraining order freezing all of your funds, freezing all of your assets, which seems to me pretty harsh, because obviously then you can't pay an attorney, you can't live. Tell me about this restraining order, how it came about, and how does one survive when all of your assets are frozen?
Well, it's hard. Basically, you have to, I would say, anticipate ahead of time that something as bizarre like this can come about and prepare for it. The other alternative is, to utilize funds from your family or from others that are willing to help you. And again, it depends on everybody's situation in terms of what their monthly expenses are and so forth. Fortunately, I reside in the house which I inherited from my parents, and there's no mortgage on that. So again, my living expenses are not extravagant, but they are there. But as I say, for the judges, they just operate like bullies. They're not supposed to put a restraining order where you're supposed to survive from the cash in your wallet and freeze all your accounts. You point this out to them that they're freezing all your accounts. They're freezing the accounts of a trust where my children are the beneficiary. They're freezing the account of a partnership where outside parties are members of the partnership.
It just seems, but to me, issuing that just seems like such a harsh thing for the judge to do without realizing the repercussions. Something else I read in your papers, which I didn't quite understand, there was a mention of you being equated to the Fort Hood terrorist. And I don't think we have a terrorist on the show today, because you're still teaching at the college, and I would assume if you were a terrorist, you'd be in jail right now. So tell me about that whole thing with the Fort Hood terrorist that I read in your transcripts.
Well, this goes back to 2010. At that time, the presiding judge or judicial hearing officer was Stanley Gartenstein. So he was basically a retired judge filling in the divorce court. So he came out with a decision, that just defies logic and common sense. So one of the charges that he made was that I committed a violent Class B felony. And violent Class B felonies are punishable by up to 25 years in prison. So they would include manslaughter, arson, rape, sodomy. The one I was accused of was that I punched my wife, fractured her face. She had reconstructive surgery with anesthesia. It cost about $8,000, and she charged it on a credit card. So again, you'd say, gee, if that happened, the person should have been prosecuted and been sent to Attica State Prison. How can a judge be writing, you committed the equivalent of a manslaughter, violent Class B felony? Or you say, well, he chopped off his wife's fingers and they grew back. Or, she had the reconstructive surgery on the face. Where did it take place? What's the hospital?
But how does this whole Fort Hood terrorist thing come into this? The picture here.
Well, that was his second bizarre, I'll call it idiotic charge. He writes, the Anthony Pappas made thinly veiled threats in the idiom used by the perpetrator of the Fort Hood massacre.
I mean, those are strong words. If that would get out with our sensitivity today to terrorists, I would think that if a college found out that a judge is calling you a terrorist, they wouldn't be comfortable with having you there. So those are serious words coming from the judge.
Yes, they're totally irresponsible because, again, as everybody understands, we've had situations where teenagers, tweeted on Facebook or on Twitter, I'm so angry with my teacher, I'm gonna do something to her. Or, you just can't go around saying, I'm so angry, I'm going to blow up the airport or do something. You're supposed to be arrested. Fortunately, I had, the understanding that this was ridiculous, that I knew how to react to it. And I will have to praise all the law enforcement agencies because I go to them and I show them these ridiculous things. I'm supposed to be a felon from Attica State Prison, or up in Attica State Prison. I'm supposed to be arrested, and the FBI should arrest me. And they've all left me alone. So I've gone to Kathleen Rice, District Attorney for Nassau County, the United States Attorney, the FBI, the New York Police Department. And I guess they figure, well, this is just another crazy judge writing nonsense because, as I say, fortunately they've left me alone and haven't interrogated me either about any felonies or terrorist threats.
Well, that's why we call the family courts the Wild West. They say anything they want, they don't follow the rules, and they don't take seriously what they say. As if a clergy person says something to you, you take them more seriously than the average person. When a judge makes statements like that, you take it seriously. But listening to your case, it seems like you're making allegations that they've just been against you. I don't know if it's a bias against men, fathers. They liked your wife. Do you know why? I mean, you obviously feel they're against you. Is there a reason? Do you think they don't like you personally? Do you think it's because you're a man? Did they not like your attorney? There's got to be some reason for the case to just go so sour, and every ruling seems to be against logic and against you. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I would say it probably started out in terms of bias against men, that I was presenting a strong case that a lot of the funds were separate property because they existed before the marriage, or I inherited them from my parents or my uncle, and so forth. And therefore they were not subject to a distribution under the law. So they didn't like that. And as they tried to bludgeon me into surrender, and I understood what they were doing and reacted to it, like arrogant bullies and psychopaths, they said, well, we can retaliate against Anthony Pappas, and nobody can do anything against us because we have judicial immunity, and we can just go on and retaliate. So we can freeze his assets, we can call him a felon, we can take away or try to take away the funds that were set aside for the children 10 years ago, whether the funds were used for their education or turned over to them. You know, we basically can do whatever we want and impose these financial penalties against Anthony Pappas.
One of my contentions about distributive effects is that there's case law when you're trying to determine these things, and there's case law is somebody else's life, not yours. When you try to extrapolate out from case law, and a lawyer is going to take that case, is going to bring it to you and say, well, in German versus German, this particular thing has happened, and you fall into that category. Well, where does the reality for you lie when that was going on in your case? They did use case law, am I right?
No, they can basically ignore all case law and just make up their own rules. So, for example, on the issue of the felony about a fractured face and reconstructive surgery, that obviously resulted from a perjury on the part of my wife. So you'd say, okay, show us the hospital, who was the doctor, show us how can you charge a reconstructive surgery on a credit card, which was her testimony. That's perjury and should be prosecuted as perjury. So the last judge, Zimmerman, when you ask her to deal with it as perjury, she responds, there is no basis in law for the relief requested.
Because they never prosecute for perjury.
Yeah,
they
right.
Don't.
So,
they just don't.
Right. So in double speak, this means I'm a judge and I don't know what to do about perjury. I never heard about it.
They won't do anything about it.
There is no basis in law for the relief requested when the law says it's a crime under the penal code, and you're taking an oath as a judge to enforce the laws. How can you say there is no basis in law for the relief requested?
By not prosecuting, it makes lying lawful.
Absolutely. And this can just go on. And when you try to appeal a lot of these things to the appellate division, you get nowhere.
Big echo. There's a big echo.
Stamp.
Yeah, it's a rubber stamp. They can say all your arguments are without merit, or something. In double speak, they can say, well, the judicial bully is the sole arbiter of his recusal. So that was another issue that came up with Gartenstein. He made a written offer to recuse himself, which I brought here, and I'll read. So it says, there was something that happened on December 8th. So after thinking it over on December 9th, 2009, he sends out a letter to both attorneys, and he says, gentlemen, in view of the record made on December 8th, each of you is advised that the undersigned will accept applications from either or both of you to declare a mistrial and return of this case for reassignment. And it goes on to say, I will require a clear, unambiguous, unconditional statement from each side. Basically, he wants a statement.
Is that like a do-over?
But it seems to me like that's great for you, because you would just obviously not consent to him being on the case. You wouldn't sign it, and now he's off your case.
Right. Well,
is that what happened?
That's what I did. I responded and said, I do not consent to you continuing to preside. And please recuse yourself. All right, so he refused that. He termed my response like a subterfuge, that somehow I maneuvered for him to write this letter, and then he threatened to retaliate in the distribution of the assets. He said, I could take into account this situation that somehow you made me send out this letter instead of being humble and saying, please, please stay on my case. You were so annoying that you took me up on my offer, so I'm going to blame you and retaliate against you, or threaten to retaliate. So you take this to the appellate division, and in doublespeak they say, well, the bully can do whatever he wants. You know, they phrase it, a judge is the sole arbiter of his recusal, which means, you know, he can do whatever he wants.
Nobody can do anything about it.
Yeah, no, and we're not going to do anything about it. So they're like endorsing judicial fraud or judicial lying. You know, a judge can lie. He can write something down in English, and pencil and paper.
Not a bad job they have.
And,
immunity,
right.
They can't do anything.
And there's no recourse.
It seems, listening to you, I mean, you're made out to be the bad guy, and your wife seems to be just the perfect woman who's playing the victim role, I guess, in this case. Is your wife, has she had any mental issues? Does she have? She seems to be causing a lot of problems and not just wanting to settle. Has she had problems in other relationships or with employers in the past?
Yes, I try to point this out to the judges because it has to do with the issue of credibility. She filed grievances against all three of her school principals in the New York City Board of Education. Something that is even more telling is she has an older brother who lives in Texas. The older brother has like 2 children, slightly older than our own 3 children. We were married in 1982. Now it's like 2014. I have never seen or spoken to the children of her older brother, and that applies to my 3 children as well.
So she's been a troublemaker and
yeah.
causing problems with her employer.
Not connecting with her own family.
And not connecting with her family, and now she's causing the problems with you. It just seems like the judge bought her story,
right,
and deems you the bad guy. And
right.
Now, you know, one of the things, you know, I know you did a protest today at John Jay College, and you're here on the show today, but something that Chris and I have seen over the years is that the judges don't like you speaking out against them. They don't like people who fight back. They want you to roll over, take all your assets, give up, and go away. You're not doing that. Have the judges ever tried to stop you from speaking out about the incompetence or the bias in the system, or do they just take that and move on and I guess try to retaliate?
Judge Falanga, who was, I'll call him the second judge, he issued an order from the bench. You are not supposed to talk or complain to anybody inside the court system or outside the court system.
Your right to free speech.
Right. He mentioned it. If he says, if you feel I'm violating your right to free speech, you have the right to do whatever you want about it. But if I hold you in contempt, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So he's threatening to hold you in contempt, even if you try to complain to somebody who is lawfully prescribed to be the place where you're supposed to complain. You know, like you can't complain to anybody. You know, you can't complain to your lawyer. You know, speaking, taking it literally. You can't complain to the
roll over, go
roll over and die.
You know, one of the things Chris does on the show, and he's done over the years, is obviously we want to expose the stories because, as Carl Lance is there for Americans for Legal Reform says, light is the best disinfectant. So we try to get the issues out. But another thing we try to do is get people so that they can learn from your mistakes. If you could hit rewind and go back to 2004, would you do anything differently?
Well, I would consider. You know, we tried to settle at the beginning, but you know, my wife was intransigent. And you know, she was familiar with the court system because she had worked as an interpreter for the Queens District Attorney. She worked on cases of domestic violence, child abuse. So it was like a legal ambush. Right. She knew that or anticipated the judges would be on her side, so she
was right.
wasn't willing to
Looks
settle.
like she was right.
So there's nothing, you wouldn't think of anything you could do different? Would you start pro se? Would you have tried to talk her into going to mediation? Or would you have just rolled over at the beginning, given her what she wanted, and moved on with, with your life? What would you, is there anything you could do differently for our listeners who are watching who may be in the same situation as you, where they have assets and that need to be split and they're going to fight about it? Because at the end of the day, the lawyers got rich.
True. Well, again, with hindsight, one could say maybe I should have done this, but you don't know. You don't have perfect foresight, or you don't have the crystal ball, and it just turned out that I encountered 3 judicial bullies, and Zimmerman did something even very bizarre at the end. That when I filed my case in the federal court, and then I was told by the federal court to serve an order on the defendants, including Judge Zimmerman. So you serve the order as you're supposed to properly. You get somebody, I'm over the age of 18, not a party to this action. So she receives the order. She transmutes it or deems it an ex parte communication. She has the law clerk staple a nasty letter on top of it, and she sends it back to me. So you're handling this right in bold print. It says U.S. District Court, Eastern District of New York, and somehow it's an ex parte message from Anthony Pappas. Wow, totally bizarre.
Well, Anthony, thank you for coming today, and we wish you a lot of luck. It doesn't seem like you're at the end. It seems like maybe you're towards the middle and you have a big road ahead of you. But we appreciate that you're speaking out and trying to educate others. You're definitely not alone. And you have a federal lawsuit for civil rights violations, and we wish you luck in that. We will definitely keep updated on that.
Thank you for having me. You are performing a wonderful service for the people of this nation.
Societal and political trends are rapidly breaking down the family that once was the cornerstone of our great American culture. At FITV, we know you cannot get this information on your own, so we bring it to your TV every week. We invite all opposing views. My name is Gary Jacobs. I'm the co-host today. Thank you, Chris DiMaggio, and thank you, Anthony Pappas, for being here today.
Thank you for having me.